Well, hello there. Tell me, little tarnished, what is the greatest sin of our time? Well, it is having an opinion on the internet, and today I will share my opinion on From Software DLCs, but unfortunately for you, you can't really disagree with me. Feel free to try though. I will quickly summarize the lore of each DLC, but it is not the part of ranking, so grab a snack and enjoy the ranking. Also, like the video, or I don't know, just like it, okay? I feel like I need to get one thing out of the way. I love all From Software DLCs, but not all of them equally. In this case, Ashes of Ariandel is the middle child. I can't wait to see them move out of the house. I still love this one, but I believe it is the weakest DLC that is carried by the end boss and 2 characters. Let's quickly talk about the issue and be done with it so I can start praising the DLC. Ashes of Ariandel is too short. That is the only issue with the entire thing. Sure, if you want to explore every single corner, it will take you maybe 3 hours, but you can blast through the entire thing within half an hour. Assuming being the casual you are, you may die to Frida 100 times and you may expand your playtime for another 10 hours of course, but anyways, Ashes of Ariandel on release achieved something magical. For the first time in From Software's history, Steam reviews weren't full of people complaining about the difficulty of a Souls DLC, but this time entire community was together pointing out how short the entire DLC was. So yeah, this is the only problem with Ashes of Ariandel. Everything else is, well, not perfect, but quite good. Well, with the only issue of this DLC out of the way, now I can talk about the parts I love about Ashes of Ariandel. I don't promise to be objective, but I will try my best to pretend. Ashes of Ariandel connects base game and both Dark Souls 3 DLCs perfectly. This is something even Shadow of the Erdtree was missing. So how does this DLC achieve it? Well, painted worlds in Dark Souls universe are safe havens for those who lost everything they had. This is where you go when you lose all your life savings to a crypto scam basically. In the painted world of Ariandel, old human slaves from the First Age live in peace. A familiar name, Slave Knight Gale, is one of them. Gale from birth was a slave forced to fight in the front lines as a meat shield. He outlived every single kingdom who stood against Gwyn. After the entire world was united under the god of sunlight, there was no more need for slave knights. Right from the start, this entire new world holds a great lore behind it, and it only gets better once you figure out one of the biggest tyrants of Dark Souls. Pontiff Sulyvahn also comes from this painting. Ashes of Ariandel sells itself short, even though it is the most important location in Dark Souls universe. In this land, you team up with 2 interesting characters, Painter and her friendly, helpful uncle Gale, who definitely isn't going to become a genocidal maniac and still save the world somehow. Throughout your journey in the painting, you will encounter a good variety of enemies despite the small scale of the map. DLC has 2 bosses. One is quite literally one of the greatest boss fights of From Software history, and the other one, well, you will want to kill it to unlock PvP arenas, but there's nothing else to it really. There's one boss design strategy Miyazaki loves putting in Souls games. It is placing bosses in wrong games. In Sekiro, hardest boss is Demon of Hatred. You are required to fight a Bloodborne boss with Sekiro mechanics. In the base game of Elden Ring, most people agree that Malenia is the hardest boss. She's a Sekiro boss you have to fight using Elden Ring mechanics basically. And when Ashes of Ariandel first came out, so many people pointed out that Frida felt like a Bloodborne boss, but not in a bad way of course, she's an amazing boss. Sister Frida is easily one of the greatest bosses ever made. She has 3 phases, but despite the difficulty, the entire fight is fair and unbelievably fun. First phase, she is slow, she introduces her moveset. Second phase turns into a minor duo fight, which is still better than every single duo fight in Elden Ring. And the third phase is where the fun begins. And the best thing is, this time you're not fighting a legendary warrior who is past their prime. No, this time you are fighting your equal, another Ashen one who failed her mission. It is an exceptionally well-made boss fight. I placed a lot of DLCs above this one, but they can hardly match the quality of Sister Frida's boss fight. I talked about Ivory King in a lot of different videos, so I will be super quick with the background of this DLC. There's a hole in the middle of a frozen wasteland. A legendary knight sees that demons are crawling out of this hole and he says, hey, let's build a city around it. So They do. They build a massive city. They build the city walls in a way to trap demons inside, and they watch over the gates of the old chaos. Long story short, they almost destroy demons for good, but at one point everything goes bad. They lose their king, and now Queen Alsana and King's pets are the only ones watching over the city, as pretty much everybody else is dead or they went hollow. If you don't know the Ivory King's lore, go check it out. It is the best piece of lore in Dark Souls 2. As much as Crown of the Ivory King has my favorite lore and favorite location, I will not rank it high. There are two minor issues with this DLC. First one is obvious. It is Frigid Outskirts, by far the worst map ever made by From Software. Play every single Souls game, there are so many bad maps, but not a single one is as low effort as Frigid Outskirts. I won't say it is a pointless map, but the entire design is a bad execution. Frigid Outskirts has to be a deadly wasteland that is mostly empty. This is where Ivory King exiles people, so naturally if you find yourself in this place, you will wander aimlessly and you will freeze to death. Or if you're lucky, King's pets will show you mercy and they will end you. But you don't need to add an empty map to show me that. I get the point, so I really don't like Frigid Outskirts. It is a disgustingly bad map. Another issue is the boss fight variety. There are 3 bosses. One is Ivory King, absolutely an amazing boss fight, but the others are King's Pet and then King's Pet, but there are 2 of them this time. Pretty lazy with the DLC bosses here, so it is a big issue in my opinion. Okay, what is the good part? Well, first off, entire DLC and map is gorgeous. I always love a good atmosphere that goes along with the story. In Allium Lois, from the moment you step in, you will see that the entire place is a dying, abandoned city. If you're playing with headphones, entire map is dead quiet. You will only hear your footsteps and nothing else. City is abandoned after the tragedy, and now there's only Queen and her most loyal servants waiting, almost frozen in time. You can reach the Queen and get a chance to fight the final boss almost instantly, but exploration will be rewarded here. You can go back to the city and the snowstorm, open different paths. You can find loyal knights and give them a chance to fight for their leader Ivory King for one last time. Crown of the Ivory King is an amazing DLC with great atmosphere, story and ending. Perfect DLC that only lacks more than one proper boss fight to support Ivory King, but other than that, map is great except Frigid Outskirts, and final boss is great, and I don't even need to repeat myself, lore is absolutely amazing. I genuinely love Dark Souls 2. It is like a Metroidvania game. There are so many distinct locations, great lore, great enemies, everything is perfect. Almost everything is perfect. Linear level design of the base game, bad animations and gameplay take most of the fun out of Dark Souls 2. But Crown of the Sunken King mostly redeems Dark Souls 2 in my eyes. Sure, the gameplay is still far from great, but there's nothing you can do about it. Where this DLC shines is the level design. Crown of the Sunken King takes place in a distant underground city Shulva. Quickly speedrunning the lore, humans and rats make a deal. Humans will rule the surface and rats will rule underground. Then some humans go, nah, I don't think I will honor this treaty. So they travel deep underground, they find a majestic sleeping dragon, and instead of worshipping the lame gods, they decide to worship this sleeping dragon. They build a massive city away from everything. There are no wars, no demons, no corruption. They live in peace. But one day, word goes out that there's a powerful dragon sleeping helplessly underground. So, Sir Yorg gathers an entire army of Drakeblood Knights. They invade Shulva. Being a distant, peaceful city, Shulva fails to defend itself. King dies, and Sir Yorg impales the dragon with his spear. But turns out, you can't really kill a dragon with a single spear thrust. Who could have guessed? Dragon wakes up, kills everything near instantly, and destroys the entire city. The end. Moral of the story, don't poke a sleeping beast of war whose ancestors ruled the world. It is just that simple, Sir York. Let's talk about the DLC itself now. Dark Souls 2 suffers from linear design, but it is not the case with Shulva. It's an underground city, but it is the most complex and detailed level in entire Dark Souls 2. It brings back the vertical level design and multiple paths of Dark Souls 1 back to life. There are so many rooms to explore, there are pillars you can interact with in order to access new paths, there are rooms with puzzles, traps, unique enemies, annoying enemies, reskinned or straight up copy-pasted enemies. Exploration may become overwhelming at points, but it never becomes boring. When it comes to underground civilizations, Shul will set the standards so high that I will forever be disappointed by the wasted potential of Profaned Capital from Dark Souls 3. But Crown of the Sunken King comes with its own problems. Mainly my only issue is the boss fight. DLC comes with 3 bosses, one is a gang squad, there's nothing special about them, just good old boring NPC encounter. And then there's Sin, the slumbering dragon, a special kind of lizard. When I first fought this boss in the ancient times when Crown of the Sunken King first came out, this fight blew my mind. Sin is mobile, he has fancy attacks, he is flying around raining down poison clouds, but I don't think Dark Souls 2 dragons aged as good as Dark Souls 1 bosses. Sin is still a great dragon fight, I still enjoy it to an extent, but it doesn't hold up all that well in today's standards. Absolutely amazing fight if you can turn the blind eye on outdated animations. Basically, Sin is a great but not a memorable boss. Then there's Elena. She is an improved version of Nashandra. She has some magic attacks, she has the classic explosion attacks almost every Dark Souls 2 boss has, and she does little bit of summoning. Overall, it's a fun fight, especially when she summons Wellstad, Encounter turns into a fun little duo fight. But once again, she is not a memorable fight, so I placed Crown of the Sunken King in this spot because I believe DLC seriously lacks a truly remarkable boss fight. It has an amazing level design, 2 good bosses, but there isn't a timeless iconic boss unlike the other 2 Dark Souls 2 DLCs. Crown of the Old Iron King is the best Dark Souls 2 DLC with some really annoying design choices. Story of Iron King is rather mysterious and tragic, also it is a bit simple. Ages after Anor Londo and the gods were forgotten, human kingdoms started forming once again. Somewhere in Drangleic, a lesser lord lived. He was visited by an outlander from far east. This is when Iron King and Sur Alone met. Sur Alone was searching for his purpose in life, so he swore to help Iron King become a force to be reckoned with. With Sur Alone's assist, Iron King built a massive castle towering over his kingdom. Together they raised an army more disciplined and well trained than any other. His kingdom became one of the richest and strongest of all Drangleic. Sur Alone's task was complete, so he left his king's side knowing that nothing could harm this unbreakable kingdom. But then King died, and together with their leader, entire kingdom was buried under ashes. Over time, kingdom turned into a crumbling ruin. At one point in time, Natalia arrived at Broom Tower. Just like her sisters, she was also tied to a king of a great kingdom, but she was late. Natalia split her soul, scattered the fragments across the kingdom to bring the deceased back to life, but she was late, she could never succeed. Somehow she started a new age for Broom Tower with the corpses of a former civilization. Stories attracted adventures, but none could breach the defenses of Natalia. There's of course more to this DLC story, but let's keep it short and move to the DLC. Crown of the Old Iron King is a brutal DLC. Especially when it first came out, it was extremely hard and unbalanced. Over time it received patches and it got better, but foundations are still there. In almost all the encounters you will be outnumbered. Oftentimes you will find yourself in a definitely not suspicious looking room. You will happily move to the center of the room and there will be 5 enemies hiding somewhere. Now at that point you can either accept your death or you can try to delay it. Enemy placement will make you regret every step you take. It can be annoying, but this is how Dark Souls 2 handle difficulty, and you get used to it over time. By design, Broom Tower is the exact opposite of Alien Lois. One of them takes place in a peaceful, silent, frozen desert, other one is in the middle of a molten landscape. In Broom Tower, you walk across a long dead kingdom. Every enemy you encounter is a corpse decayed ages ago, and now their empty shells are animated to keep you away. Within the tower, you will find an abandoned factory, broken clockwork contraptions, dysfunctional gears, and machines at every corner. DLC perfectly captures a dead kingdom. And then there are bosses. There's a variant of Smelter Demon that is much better than the base game version, but I refuse to praise a reskinned boss, so let's look at the proper ones instead. Fume Knight and Sur Alone are some of the best fights in Dark Souls 2. While Fume Knight is much slower and simpler than almost almost all the recent main bosses, within Dark Souls 2 mechanics he is a difficult and fun boss. I'm not even talking about the amazing sword he gave to the Dark Souls 2 and 3 players. Then there's also Strollin. He may have one of the worst runbacks ever, but even his terrible runback fails to overshadow his amazing fight. Strollin doesn't have the most detailed moveset, and his grab attacks may be the reason why so many gamepads got broken in the past, but his design, his atmosphere, basically his entire fight is great. So there you go, Crown of the Old Iron King delivers a complex map with a great background, and it complements the map with challenging but rewarding difficulty. And also it completes the DLC with 2 amazing boss fights. Dark Souls 1 is no doubt a masterpiece. Amazing world, amazing atmosphere, memorable bosses, but then there's the second half. As soon as I step into Lost Isolate, I know it is time to go back to main menu and start a new game. Artorias of the Abyss is here to apologize for that later half of Dark Souls 1. It is a polished world with a great story behind it. I will speedrun the background of the DLC, but if you want to learn more about it, you can just check my channel. So the story is simple. We are once again in a mighty human kingdom, but in Lordran you can't go 2 days without a tragedy happening. So a fancy giant serpent who goes by the name Cod arrives at the city of Ulasil. He brainwashes all the humans, and then they awake a powerful dude with a powerful dark soul, but he's not happy that the nobility of this new fancy kingdom stole and desecrated everything he cared about. So Manus throws a tantrum, goes mad, and transforms into a godly beast of the abyss. He destroys the kingdom, and now everybody is a deformed monster. Thanks a lot, Cod. All the gods up in Anor Londo, being the mighty war machines they are, they come up with a genius plan. They will all hide in their castle while a beast walker goes down to Ulasil and kills this beast of abyss. Surprise, surprise, he fails to kill Manus, he gets corrupted, and now this kingdom is everybody's problem, including you, Chosen Undead. It becomes such a big problem that you get pulled back in time to deal with it, and that is how you go back ages in time to save humanity. But you will get no credits. Get used to it. Pardon my DLC lore speedrun, but it is time we talk about the gameplay. Artorias of the Abyss starts with a new boss right away. Sanctuary Guardian is not my favorite boss, but it is one of the most beloved bosses in the Souls community. Boss prepares you to the difficulty. This time encounters will be much more complex and aggressive. Throughout your journey in Dark Souls 1, you explore a ruined world drowned in chaos and despair. But this time in Artorias of the Abyss, there's something entirely different. You don't wander in a dying world, but this time you are right there before everything went wrong. Sure, Anor Londo is not in its golden age, but you still discover the world before the Hollowing and Undead Curse. This DLC sets an entirely different tone. You are not trying to recover the old order, but you are trying to protect it. As you wander around the map, you will see Abyss slowly corrupting the landscape around the city. Soon you will also encounter the legendary Abyss Walker Artorias, the greatest humanoid boss that inspired so many great bosses. Now he is not as complex as the newer bosses, but with his flawless background and amazing boss fight, he is a timeless masterpiece. Artorias is one of the greatest bosses in From Software history, but it doesn't end here. There's also Black Dragon Calamite, one of the mightiest dragons in Dark Souls universe. His fight still holds up, and it is still one of the greatest dragon fights ever. And then there's also the ending with Manus, one of the most tragic characters ever written, stands in front of you as a brutal monster. Manus is much faster than any Dark Souls 1 boss, and to this day he is still one of the best monster bosses in the genre. Artorias of the Abyss comes with a 10 out of 10 story, amazing world design, and great bosses with unique lore and encounters. Maybe DLC's only flaw is the lack of weapon and armor variety, but other than that, this is a perfect DLC. Okay, let's see if I can finally talk about Bloodborne in my videos. Nope, still not here. Maybe another time, who knows. Look, Shadow of the Earth Tree, this is how you properly end a game. Ring City is almost the perfect DLC with a single tiny issue. Let's talk about the issue quickly and then move to the fun part. City itself is the problem. Maybe Dark Souls 2 DLC spoiled me with massive DLC maps, but Ring City is a bit too linear for my taste. When you look at the entire DLC map, oh boy, it is massive. but sadly it is not the case with the city itself. It is extremely linear and limited. You only see the main streets of the city before you reach to the end. This doesn't mean city itself is bad or the map is bad, you can put down your pitchforks. It is still an amazing map, but to this day it still left me wish for more. I want to explore the back streets of this amazing prison city. But oh well, you don't get everything you want. Okay, time for praising the DLC. Yay, fun part. Okay, what is so great about this DLC? If you even dare to ask this question, you should know I'm disappointed in you, but I will educate you nonetheless. We start the DLC directly with a throwback to Dark Souls 2. You can't have a good Souls map without poison in it. So we revisit Earthen Peak Ruins. If you know Dark Souls 2, all poison maps eventually lead to a demon boss, and this is where we meet Demon Prince. Step aside Ornstein and Smog, your superior is here. Demon Prince made me believe From Software has finally mastered duo fights. I mean, it is a flawless fight. There are two deadly and aggressive bosses perfectly telegraphed. They will always attack you, but they will cue their attacks in a way to keep the fight fair. And they will constantly change their fight strategy to keep the duo fight balanced. There will be one in the distance spamming range attacks while the other one is right on top of you. Then the second phase comes. Depending on which one you killed first, the rest of the fight will entirely change. It is just a perfect fight. I don't know, I love it. Sue me. To this day, I still struggle to comprehend how From Software went from Demon Prince to Godskin Duo and Gargoyle Duo. Like, what are you doing, my dude? There's only this one matter Elden Ring failed to surpass Dark Souls 3, and it is the duo fights. Actually, there may be more than one, now that I think, so never mind. So right at the beginning, this DLC starts with the greatest duo fight in From Software history, and trust me, it only gets better. After the boss fight, Gwyn's enslaved demons will fly you to the prison city where Gwyn exiled the leftover humans after the war against dragons. City itself holds a great importance to the end of Dark Souls saga. By now you learned that the world is locked in an endless cycle of burning until the end of time. Age of Fire will start again and again until there's nothing but ashes left in the world. Only way to save humankind lies within the dark soul of pygmies. With enough of them, Painter can create a new world away from curse and corruption. Here you follow the footsteps of Slave Knight Gale to help and safely get him back to the painted world of Ariandel. You will walk in the streets of a dying hollow city, you will encounter the slaves forced to fight against all the horrors of the world. You will see a mighty dragon trained by gods to consume anything touched by the abyss. You will see giants enslaving the souls of anyone dared to invade the city. There is just a little bit of everything. And you will also meet an old friend. Patches the Unbreakable will guide you just like he guided and protected the earlier versions of you. Also, if you don't like Patches, I have a personal issue with you. A life dedicated to hunting greedy, corrupted humans and lords, Patches lives through countless ages of fire to meet you at the end of the world, and he helps you defeat deadly enemies as he rediscovers himself. Here below the city you will fight the greatest dragon boss ever made, a tragic dragon trained by those slain his entire race. Since the day he hatched, he was trained to kill. He lived tens of thousands of years, and now his tired, corrupted body is standing there in front of you. There is one last human touched by the abyss who he must slain. You are a boss to Midir as much as he is a boss to you. By this point, DLC already has the greatest duo and dragon fight of the studio's history, and only thing left is a perfect ending to a perfect DLC. You will find yourself at the end of time. There's nothing left to kindle. Lords and gods are no more. Nothing can start another age of fire. This is it. You see the end of your world. You see what false promises of Gwyn brought to this land. But there's hope. If you can get your hands on Dark Soul, Painter will build a new world. And this is exactly where you encounter Gale. You may have taken the easy road to reach the end of time, but Gale fought an eternity without going hollow to reach there. His body is filled with Dark Soul. If a beast takes over his body, worlds will drown in an unending age of dark. But even after losing his mind, Gale only thinks of his mission. He has to collect one last bit of Dark Soul to bring it back to his lady. To save the world, only one of you can survive. Two heroes clashing at the end of the world. No matter what happens, with the soul of the fallen hero, a new world will born. It all ends with the two of the greatest powers left in the world locked in a battle. A perfect DLC not only has a perfect ending, but it also perfectly ends the entire Dark Souls saga. Shadow of the Erdtree is a 9 out of 10 DLC for me. To be honest with you, if it wasn't for the underwhelming ending and the story, I would easily say it is a 10 out of 10. Basically, Michaela out-molests Moog in a molesting competition, and now this is everybody's problem. Moog sees Michaela as an easy prey, tries to kidnap him during the peak of Shattering. But turns out people not only love Michaela because of how nice and likable he is, but also he brainwashes people a little bit for their unconditional love and support. On the way back to Moogwin Palace, Michaela manipulates Moog, and now Moog's evil genocidal plans come to an end because there's an even bigger villain with even bigger plans. Michaela goes to Land of Shadow to ascend as the new god of the new age. He resurrects Radahn using Moog's body, and we have to refight Radahn on steroids this time. DLC's story expands in many different branches, but this is basically the main plot. Dude wants to ascend and become a god, but I already promised my waifu Rani that she's going to start a new age, so I can't really let Michaela become one. That is the story. Let's talk about the DLC itself. Shadow of the Erdtree is almost like a brand new game by itself. If EA made this DLC, they would probably split it into 3 parts and sell it as 3 separate games. While I don't think DLC is perfect, I know it is an incredible title that will set an industry standard for at least the other honest studios that care about the player base. This part will be a little bit difficult to talk about since I don't want to repeat the things I said in the previous video. Shadow Tree fragments are probably the most important mechanics studio introduced with the Shadow of the Erdtree. There's a reason why Souls games have no difficulty sliders. By design, developers want everybody to experience the same game. Bosses have the same amount of health and same amount of base damage for every player. But being the endgame content, DLCs have a serious balance issue. Ring City, for example, was designed and balanced around soul level 120. But there's not a single thing holding players back, so if you wanted, you could start the DLC at level 800 and blast through the entire DLC. Naturally, there was a massive gap for balancing. Shadow of the Erdtree solved this issue by making rune level mostly irrelevant to the DLC. You can go into the DLC at level 1 or you can go in at level 713. Regardless of your level, you will barely do damage and you will most likely die within 2 or 3 hits. But as you collect Shadow Tree fragments, your flat damage and defense multiplies. So DLC has its own power and level system to balance the game. It encourages exploration and gives a bigger meaning to the DLC map, but I must say it's not perfect. In the base game, you can easily identify sacred tears and golden seeds, plus there are way more golden seeds than you need, so it is easy and convenient to upgrade your flask. But Shadow Tree fragments can be found under Michaela's crosses, they can be looted from some enemies carrying pots, or they can be looted from some elite enemies. It is so easy to miss them. Also, you need all 50 out of 50 fragments to max out your blessing, so it can be a bit frustrating. It's a great system, but it requires a little bit of rework. Another thing DLC nailed was the NPCs and quest lines. Usually in Souls DLCs there are little to no NPCs, but this time there are a lot of new quest lines and NPCs. Also, they are all in-depth and interesting characters. For example, there is Sir Ensbach. He was a pure-blood knight, a former servant of Moog. Michaela's lore make Moogwin dynasty look innocent, but even before his involvement, Moog was an evil power. Those in his service, his knights slain countless innocent souls in lands between. So you would expect Sir Ensbach to be an edgy evil character. But his redemption, his devotion and his wisdom gives so much personality, and he ends up facing gods by your side just to help you start a better age for humans. And then there is Egon. His storyline has to be the best alternative version to Moby Dick. He is an undaunted hunter full of hatred. He will not stop, he will not die until Tyrant Dragon Bale dies. His story becomes much more interesting when you realize Bale and Egon are the exact copies of each other. And then there's Lida, a noble loyal knight who dedicated her entire life to Michaela. Maybe she is charmed, maybe she blindly follows Michaela, but there's one thing certain: she won't forgive anyone who stands in the way of her promised god. There are so many interesting NPCs, and From Software did an amazing job giving them all a unique story and personality. Also, we have to talk about the bosses. From Software nailed humanoid boss design with Mesmer. It is by far the best boss in both base game and the DLC. It is fair, cinematic, challenging challenging and fun, but Mesmer is not the only good boss in this DLC. There's Midra, Rolana, Bale, and Romina, each visually stunning and fun bosses. Some may dislike the difficulty, but I personally loved each of these boss encounters. Except the final boss, of course. For me, the only real flaw of this DLC is the ending. I don't like who the final boss is. I don't like the story of the final boss, I don't like the build up for the final boss, and I especially don't like the second phase of the final boss. But I won't let one boss ruin the amazing experience I had throughout the DLC. Shadow of the Erdtree is a perfect DLC that is not only as detailed as a full game, but also rivals so many modern games out there. There is still room for improvement, but Shadow of the Erdtree is without a doubt a masterpiece. Well, if you made it this far, consider giving a like and subscribe for amazing Souls content, and don't forget to share your own opinion. But this is it for today, I will see you on the next one, bye.